Recently, while chatting with some other watch friends, we got onto the topic of who influenced, how did we get to where we are in the hobby? I found myself thinking that was actually a pretty good idea for a video. So here we are. Here are the 5 people that influenced me in who I am as a watch collector and as a YouTuber. Hi, welcome back to Not So Obvious Watches. I'm Pete McConville. Okay, so here are the 5 people that have influenced me, who I am as a watch collector and who I am as a YouTuber. And I'll start with the most obvious one. I influenced who I am as a watch collector, or at least past Pete did. Who I was as a photographer, who I was as a car collector, who I was as a traveler, who I was as a part-time amateur philosopher and just general human being, all sort of that 30, 40, 50 years prior to getting into watches, all shaped who I am as a watch collector. And that really has defined everything that's come next, or laid the groundwork for pretty much everything that's come next. Okay, so that's the sort of the beginning part. Now let's talk about what's defined me in the YouTube social media space as a watch collector. I would say no individual, but rather the mass of social media around watches had a mass influence on me. And that influence was to push me in the opposite direction. When I first started getting into watches, I saw all the same channels that are big right now. So Teddy and Jory and Jody and TGV. I saw a little bit of Archie and that end of the market. So I saw them all, and they all influenced me in one very specific way. They repelled me. I don't mean they themselves, and I don't mean their channels, but the incredibly homogenous, incredibly sameness of the watches that they just routinely cycled over and over and over again. If I didn't have a Speedmaster, if I didn't have a Rolex, if I didn't have a Hamilton, if I didn't have this, if I didn't have that, then I got this sense of there's a defined canon of watches which I have to own. Now, remember I said earlier the previous Pete has really been an influence on who I am. Previous Pete sees the crowd, sees the herd, and automatically runs the other way and has to do something different. So I was my immediate, almost right from the very beginning, I was told these were the watches I had to have. I immediately knew there will be value, there will be merit, there will be greatness elsewhere, and it's my job to find it. So that was kind of the second great influence on me, particularly as a collector. Okay, so now as a YouTuber, there's really 3 main influences on me. The first I would have to credit is John P., Federico's Offsider. Not because I want to be like him, or I look at the world the same way, or I think he's a great YouTuber, but I have to credit him with this simple fact. A video that he did, I felt so missed the mark, was so narrow in its view, that it was the thing that inspired me to take the GoPro off the front of my bike, record myself, and create my first ever channel, my first ever thing. So he was the impetus that said, Pete, if you're looking at the world a different way and you're afraid that that people, or you think that people need to hear it, get off your ass and make a channel. So thanks, John. That's what you made me do. The next big influence on me as a YouTuber was Adrian at Bark and Jack. Now, we're going back in time when I first started thinking about doing this a couple of years ago, and Adrian's videos were still pretty early, still pretty raw. Better than mine are now, but nowhere near as his art, nowhere near as good as his art now. But he was just a guy who didn't pretend that he knew everything about watches, but thought that there was real value in coming in and looking at watches and thinking hard about watches and trying to come up with a more holistic view, that simply knowing a bank of reference numbers wasn't not even enough, but not even necessary, that there was another way of looking at watches. And he gave me kind of, watching him and enjoying him and seeing that grow made me think, you know what, there's a space for someone like me, because I still aren't that interested in reference numbers and that sort of thing. I think that's monumentally boring and gets in the way of actually enjoying the hobby for me. I know other people love it. And so seeing someone else do that and be that kind of felt like it gave me license to start moving. And that's kind of, as I've got more confident, frankly, I'm getting more and more like that. You're seeing the inner me coming out. The last influence, and probably the biggest influence on me, not just as a YouTuber, but as a way of looking at watches and the watch industry. And to be honest, if I go back and look at my videos, the guy I reference more than anyone else is clearly Ariel Adams. There are lots of other people in the media who know watches, who know things that I will never know. However, and in many cases, they know things I don't even want to know. However, I get the feeling sometimes that they all look at the watch industry like someone peering through a keyhole. They have these very narrow views that can focus on a watch, maybe a brand, maybe something at a slice in time, or maybe in a watch in a slice in time at a particular place. But no one seems to be able to sit back and I include in this some of the greats of our industry, like Tim Mosso. They don't seem to sit back and say, let's look at everything. Let's look at everything, that not just within the watch community, what's happening outside of the watch community that is driving watch designs this way, that's driving the consumer behavior this way, that's driving the media behavior this way. Now, funnily enough, Tim does go into that. He knows this stuff and he thinks about it, but he's at his best when he's a guest on other people's shows. Unfortunately, none of that stuff comes through in his Watchbox stuff. But Ariel makes that what he does. Ariel is really thoughtful about it. Now, there's a little bit of that comes through with the Hodinkee guys as well, and Jack Forster in particular tends to look at the world a little bit that way. But I'm going to put Ariel as a bigger influence, a more significant influence, because he is more willing to hold the watch industry to account. Jack is still within that Hodinkee mindset, within that kind of, we're here to boost, not necessarily to critique the industry. So as much as I really like, and I quote Jack a fair bit too, and I really like his, and I would love to sit down and have a conversation with him. It's that critical analysis that Ariel brings, that kind of forensic analysis, and that very, very mindful, very deliberate idea about what is his place. And he recognizing that he is both in the industry and of the industry, but also outside of it, and tries to create that distance and create that perspective, is something I try and do very hard. He said something recently, there you go, I'm going to say it. He said something in a last podcast, we're all biased. The difference between him and someone else, and what I try and make the difference between me and someone else, is something very much I've taken from him, is to stop pretending I'm not, but rather to accept that I'm human, which means that I'm biased, and then explore that bias and extract it, and then say, okay, now if I can put that to one side as best as I can, then what's left over? Or conversely, if I tell you about it, I allow you to say, okay, so you can then try and filter out my bias. But the problem with people like Hodinkee and everyone else is they make no such effort. And that, again, being strong, repels me. It's why there's so much I can't consume in the rest of the media anymore, because there's that lack of transparency about what are your assumptions, what are your biases before I come in. Ariel never does that. You know exactly where he stands when he's talking, and that is something that has been really influential on me. So he is, without doubt, the biggest influence on who I am and who I would like to be in this show, in this game. Yeah, so that's it. The 5 influences on me. Me, you know, the 40-something years of me before I got here. John P., who made me start up a channel. Every other YouTuber out there who was so homogenous in their view that I felt driven to go somewhere else. Adrian, who showed me that a kind of everyman who just applied himself and thought about things has a place on YouTube talking about watches. And Ariel, who said that watches and horology and this hobby is so much more than just handsets and movements and balance springs, that there's a whole industry and a people and a design aesthetic and history and currency exchanges and marketing and digitization. All of that is part of our hobby. That's how I am who I am. Now over to you, and I would love to hear your comments. I really want to know who has influenced you in your journey as a watch collector, as a watch hobbyist. God forbid, if you have your own channel, if you have your own media outlet, or even most of us actually do in a way, if you consider Instagram as our kind of channels, who influences you there? Who do you want to be like? And or not even who you want to be like, but who have you seen that you think, if that was my stuff, I'd quite like it. That's probably not a bad way of thinking about it. Anyway, I've been Pete McConville. This has been Not So Obvious Watches, and I really want to know who not who do you like, not who do you like to watch, but who influences you, who actually shapes your thinking about watches. Leave the comments below. Anyway, I'll see you later. Bye.